afternoon. We call it Tents to Tea. As you came in, I hope you were able to enjoy those gorgeous vintage posters from World War I and World War II on loan to us by the Barnum Armory in East Greenwich. I'd like to take a moment and just direct your attention to the exits located in each corner of the room, just in case of an emergency. And also, if you could please just take one moment and turn off any device that makes a sound, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you. As I said, I'm Sarah, and welcome. I work at the VA, and every quarter I have the pleasure and honor of organizing this event as a way for our women veterans to come together and share their stories. I'm a veteran. I retired from the Air Force in 2006. But I must tell you, I spent 4 years in the Army. I enlisted in the Army. I've just turned 18. I've been many places, but one of the places I served was a place called Camp Casey in South Korea, very close to the DMZ. And, well, anyway, enough about that. As I said, about every 3 months, we come together to honor our wonderful female veterans as they meet one another, tell stories, and forge friendships. We have all our wonderful generations here today, our more seasoned veterans and our more recent veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan. So I'm glad you're with us. We honor all of you. Where are our pioneers, those who came first, our World War II women veterans? Ladies, please raise your hands. And keep them up there. Try to receive a gift for your seniors. These are the women who paved the way, all the way to the present, for the women who are serving today, and that are able to be all they can be, to borrow a phrase from one of our services, because of what these early pioneers did. I'd also like to recognize all our veterans, men and women, who have served from World War II up until today. Thank you all for your service. In fact, that's one of the things I'd like to do today. We have 5 veterans of World War II whom I've asked to join me on the stage to share their stories with you. Bessie, Helen, Lucy, Louisa, and Carol. But before we do that, if everyone would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As our 5 special guests make their way to the stage, I want to share part of an article that I ran across the other day. It's entitled, "We Served Too." We go by many names: daughter, sister, mother, aunt, grandmother, children of the Great Depression. But the name we are most proud of is veteran of the Second World War. We served too. We served too, some 400,000 of us from all over the country. We heard the call and joined to do our part for our country in its hour of need. Maine to California, New York to Florida, and many places in between, we women served at home and abroad, in offices, in hospitals, in foxholes, recruiting, guarding prisoners of war, training pilots, caring for recovering soldiers, working in the motor corps. There was no job too small or too big for us to do. And that is the perfect segue for our conversation. The World War II ladies and I have prepared and rehearsed a little routine for all of you. We'd like to share a poem written by one of those pioneering World War II women, Irene Davey, who recently passed away at 104 years old. I'm also saddened to share the news that one of our other pioneering veterans, Charlotte Quasha, passed away this week, also at 104 years old. This is in their honor. It's entitled, We of the Motor Corps.
Ready, girls? Left, 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 right, left. Forward, march. Left, 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 right, left. 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 Left, face. Company, halt.
We can drive them through the ditches.
We can drive them o'er the plains.
We can drive them through the valley.
And o'er the rough terrain.
We will drive them in the sunshine.
And through the pounding rain.
We of the Motor Corps.
We will always keep them rolling.
You can bet we'll keep them rolling.
We will always keep them rolling.
We of the Motor Corps.
We can drive the mighty trucks.
And we drive the little jeeps.
Drive them through all sorts of peril. And you'll never hear a peep.
Drive them through the desert sand.
Well, we are lending you a hand.
We of the Motor Corps. We can drive the car of mercy.
For the wounded and the sick.
Drive the staff car too.
And get you there double quick.
We can drive the weapons carrier.
For the arms that your boys need.
We of the Motor Corps.
Do not think that we are tough boys.
'Cause we look a little rough.
We can prove that we are ladies. At the same time, do our stuff.
We will drive them through the strange lands.
Just to offer you a hand.
We of the Motor Corps.
Thank you all for sharing that moment with us. So now, ladies, can you tell us what it was like at the beginning? What made you decide to enlist?
Yeah, the war broke out in 41. December 7, 1941. But my mother, me being the only daughter and my brother going in, wasn't gonna sign for nothing. I begged. That the lieutenant, she came over to the house and started saying, well, if your daughter puts on that dress uniform, would that make her a different person? My mother said, I hope not. There's your answer.
Well, I lived in New York my whole life, and the Hudson River is there. My dad used to take us down to visit the ships when they came in on the river, just like they do in Rhode Island. I always admired the sailors. I wanted to be a boy. I wanted to be a sailor. So as soon as the opportunity came to join, well, you couldn't start till you were 20. And so as soon as I turned 20, I went right down and joined the Navy.
Well, I was working at an insurance firm in Providence, just doing work, you know. I was married. My husband was killed. His ship was torpedoed. We were together 9 weeks, and 5 months after we were married, he was killed. I wanted to do something. Don't ask me why I joined the Waves, I just did. I can't remember.
Well, we were up in Boston, me and a friend of mine, and we both saw this sign or something saying, join the Army and do something for your country. So we both signed up. Well, when she got home and told her father, that was out.
My mother and father had to sign because I was 20. I went through the interviews when you go in to join, and it was the first time in my life that I had ever fainted. I have difficulty with my veins. They're very small, and they kept probing and probing and probing. When did you faint last? I said, I have never fainted before I got here, and I've never fainted since.
Well, I told my mother, and you know, my mother, well, she didn't object at the time, not until the night I was leaving. I'd already signed up, and she says to me, I don't think you should go. A very good friend of hers was at the house at the time, and she said, Letty, if she doesn't go, she's going to be AWOL, and they're going to come and get her and take her away and put her in the brig. My father gave me great advice as I boarded the train. He said, no matter what you do, you keep your chin up and your head held high.
I was working in a department store in Providence, Shepherd's, and my father was very reluctant. My mother, well, I think if she had been young herself, she would have signed herself up, so I had no problems on that side. But they both had to sign for me to go in. So I went down to Providence to the train station. I met a few other girls going to boot camp in New York City. And we rode the train all the way to Grand Central Station. And then we were marched to Hunter College.
Yes, that was your boot camp. That's where everybody started. We learned marching formation and to follow orders.
I was there. I was at boot camp at Hunter College. I was there, I don't know how many months. There was a lot of walking back and forth, parading.
I was at Fort Oglethorpe down Georgia. The weather there, it was tough. We had to eat on the train and sleep. We didn't even have bunks. It was a long trip on the train. We had muster every morning on the street level. Then we would march to the college for breakfast, and then we marched to classes. Then we were marched to a field where we learned more marching and how to respond to commands.
Yes, we were often singing a song about, I don't want no more Navy. Gee, Ma, I want to go home.
Oh, I know that one. Oh, they say that in the Army, the coffee's mighty fine. Well, it's good for cuts and bruises, but tastes like turpentine. Oh, I don't want no more of Navy life. Gee, Ma, I want to go home. The chicken in the Army, they say, is mighty fine. I drum rolled off the table and squashed a friend of mine. Oh, I don't want no more of Navy life. Gee, Ma, I want to go home. The clothing that they give us, they say, is mighty fine. But me and half my regiment can all fit into mine. Oh, I don't want no more of Navy life. Gee, Ma, I want to go home. The salary that they pay us, they say, is mighty fine. They give you $50 and take back $49. Oh, I don't want no more of Navy life. Gee, Ma, I want to go. Gee, Ma, I want to go. Gee, Ma, I want to go home.
Well, you know, we had a terrible drill instructor, a Chief Corbin of some kind. We had gotten a series of shots in our left arm, and he kept giving us dress right over and over again. Well, our arms were swelling, aching from the shots. That was tough.
Well, half of us were sick, and all of us were listless and uncomfortable from those shots. But some of the girls passed out. I mean, it really didn't bother me too much, except my arms were heavy and they ached.
After the day was over, we all got together in a circle in the evening and cried about our circumstances. One girl missed her boyfriend terribly, another missed her dog. We had Kleenex in the center of the circle, and we just sat there and cried. One of our officers came to the door, opened it, looked in, saw what was happening, and went right back out again.
Every day you had to get up at 6 a.m. in the morning, march, no matter the weather. We had to go to a place to put our gas masks on in case we needed them. And they told everybody, don't wear your makeup. When I took my mask off, I had lipstick all over my face. I got in trouble because of it. It was tough. One sergeant was like, get the lead out of your pants. She was mean. Well, when I was in boot camp, I remember being in this assembly. And in this one assembly, this woman officer got up and she said, there are 200 women in this assembly.
1/4 of you will be having your special time of the month at any given time. We cannot have 1/4 of you not taking a shower. You will take a shower every single day. Well, growing up, you never took a bath if you had that certain time of the month. You never even washed your hair. I mean, if you told your teacher you were regular, you didn't have to take a shower because nobody took a shower during that certain time of the month.
So she actually said you will take a shower every single day.
Mm-hmm. And I said, really? And guess what? I took a shower every day, and nothing happened. That was such a shock to me. I still remember it to this day.
On Sundays, they had a Catholic service and they had a Baptist service. And the Baptists would sing, and they bring their songs back to the barracks. Well, a friend of mine said to me, "Why are you going to that Catholic service? It's only an hour. The Baptist service is 3 hours." So I said, "Let's go." So we would go to the Baptist service just for 3 hours of rest and peace and quiet.
We were reviewed by Eleanor Roosevelt. It was quite the experience. It was July, maybe just into August, and we were wearing wool uniforms. The summer ones had not come through. Well, we were so hot in the sun, and there was no shade. And we were standing on this embankment, and some of the women just rolled right down the embankment. They were having heat stroke. No one had warned us about not locking our knees. Oh, their eyes rolled back in their head. All you could see was the whites. A corpsman came and took them out on stretchers.
So, what positions did you fill? What types of jobs did you have?
Well, from boot camp, I went into supplies. They asked me, "Would you like to go to Hawaii?" I sat back and I said, "I joined the Navy to serve my country. Wherever you send me, I will go." So they sent me to the CB base here in Rhode Island.
We had 3 choices for a duty assignment, so I chose New York, Chicago, and San Francisco, but I really wanted to be in New York. My 4th grade geography book had a picture of the Empire State, and I wanted to see it.
At basic training, they came in and said they needed so many MPs.
Military police.
And they started pointing, you, and you. We didn't have a choice. We all got transferred out to different bases. At the time, the women, unless they were nurses or medics, you didn't go overseas too much. So I spent most of my time at the Boston Army base. All we had was a club, a whistle, and a sentry box with a phone in it.
That was the sad thing about being in the service. You meet so many wonderful people. You get to like them, then you have to say goodbye. You never see them again. That's true.
Which branch did each of you serve in? The Waves, the Army, Coast Guard? The Waves stood for?
Women accepted for volunteer emergency service.
Well, I was in the Waves, but a friend of mine was in the Coast Guard, so for her, it was SPARS, a shortened version of the Coast Guard motto, Semper Paratus, always prepared. Or as she often said, seldom prepared, always ready.
And for the Army, it was first the
WAAC's, Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, and then later the Women's Army Corps, WAC. Oh, that reminds me, I've got another song for you. A lot of you might remember this. It was called Colonel Bogey's March. Duty is calling you and me. We have a date with destiny ready. The wax are running, their pulse is steady, the world to set free. Service, we're in it heart and soul. Victory is our only goal. We love our country's honor, and we'll defend it against any foe. Colonel Bulky's mom.
As I remember, the Waves came first in July of 1942 as an official division of the Navy, with the Spars later that year. And then the Army with the change from the WAAC to the Women's Army Corps the following year. And then about a year later came the WASPs, the Women Air Force Service Pilots. So, by the end of 1943, all branches now had women serving officially.
Well, the 3 years that I spent in the Waves completely changed my life. I would have been a small-time girl, but instead I became a cosmopolitan, reading the New York Times instead of the Denver Post. Oh, there was a women's service center, tickets for a Broadway play, the Metropolitan Opera, all at no cost. Our uniform was our ticket.
Well, after basic training, the schooling, I was supposed to be assigned to a position on base in recreation. And I remember it was wintertime, and we were singing a Christmas song, The Bells of White Christmas and all that. And I was standing on this side of the wall, and my boss, the captain, went into the office to talk to the woman in charge of recreation. And he said to her, "I have a new recruit, and she'll be working with you." And then she said, "There'll be no Jews in my house." Well, I never realized. I don't even know how she knew I was Jewish. I guess on my dog tags it must have listed Hebrew. Anyway, I didn't say a word. I left them talking, and I walked back to headquarters. And then he came walking back to headquarters. My boss came back and said to me, "So this is where you disappeared to?" And I said, "I'm ready." "Ready for what?" "I'm going home." "Whoa, wait a minute, what do you mean?" I said, "I don't have to be in this army. I am not changing my religion." "We'll find other plans for you." And he did.
Because of the service center, I was able to see my first opera. A Coast Guard girl and I saw on a bulletin board that there were 2 tickets for a Wagnerian opera. So we went to a very luxurious apartment and were let in by a maid in uniform and were ushered into the bedroom of the woman who owned the seats. We were 5th or 6th row center, so she wanted to see the people who would be using her seats because people knew they were hers. So she was in bed with pink satin sheets and pillowcases and all tired out because she had done all this work to arrange a Red Cross ball. So we just used those tickets, and my friend says, look at the people in the boxes. I do declare that's Mrs. Vanderbilt." And it was very exciting.
Well, I was stationed at Fort Sam Houston in Texas, and I wasn't on post very long when they decided that women would become part of the military and not the auxiliary.
The change from the WAAC to the WAC.
So in August of 1943, we all had to take a new oath and join the Army. And all of a sudden, I get my orders. I'm going overseas. I'm going to New Guinea.
Well, they gave me a job as a recruiting officer, and they asked me what country I wanted to work in. And I said, well, someplace warm because I get cold very easy. And I'd already had pneumonia twice. So they gave me what's called the Southern Command, Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee. So we had to go to Des Moines, Iowa for our training, and lo and behold, I came down with the measles. And all of us, everyone in my barracks, we were quarantined. Well, they all hugged me and said, "We don't have to wash the floors. We don't have to clean the grease traps in the floors. We don't have to serve the food." They were as happy as could be.
All the time I was in as an MP, I worked 11 o'clock at night to maybe 9 in the morning. The Boston Army base is the longest base you've ever seen, miles and miles. It was so cold we had to wear long johns, and we women changed duty every 10 minutes.
Well, I was in New Guinea about 9 months. And I remember one night I was sitting in this foxhole, and it's pouring. And Tokyo Rose says she's going to bomb. And I say, she's not going to bomb. It's raining.
For those who don't know, Tokyo Rose was the name given to a group of women who were part of the Japanese propaganda directed towards American forces during World War II. American servicemen would listen to broadcasts from Tokyo, trying to read between the lines to learn how the war was really going from what she said on these broadcasts. Tokyo Rose tried to undermine the American efforts in the war and to dampen the morale of the troops in the Pacific.
I remember I had a friend, she was in New Guinea too. I remember her saying about how they had to dig foxholes and how when it rained they would all fill up with water. One night, the air raid siren went off, and she said they were all told to run and jump into the foxholes. So she said to me, mine was filled with water. And I said, I would rather get killed in an air raid than muddy in a foxhole.
Well, we were getting drowned when this truck pulled up. And it had films. They were showing news films. And what do you think they were showing? Providence. Brown University football on Elm Grove Avenue. And you could look up Elm Grove Avenue and see the goalpost. And there's my nephew sitting on the front porch of my sister's house watching the game. She lived across the street from the stadium, and as we're watching, they kick the ball over the goalpost. My sister walks out the front door from the living room and onto the front porch. And I'm yelling, my family, my family. And in New Guinea, it's raining.
Well, I wrote to my family, my mother, 5-6 days a week during the war. I mean, in those days, the only means of contact was by mail. I mean, people would wait for the mailman to come. They would stand on the sidewalk and wait. So I knew that the best thing that I could do for my family was to send a letter. So I wrote almost every day of the week, telling her what was going on. And she saved all my letters.
I'm so glad that you mentioned your letters. When I first heard that story from Louisa, I was amazed. I kept thinking how remarkable that her mother had the foresight to save them all. A while ago, I asked Louisa if I could read them, and she allowed me the honor to do so. So I've told Louisa this before, so I'm not telling tales out of school. They are absolutely wonderful. Such amazing details.
They are just filled with everyday stuff. They are not very interesting.
Well, I think they're interesting. In fact, I made copies of a few that I thought were particularly interesting, knowing we would be meeting again for one of these teas, so I brought them with me, and I'd like to know if it's okay to share them with everyone.
If you think it would be helpful.
I do. Let me see. Here's the one. From June 9, addressed to your mother while you were still in boot camp at Hunter College. Dear Mama, I think I've marched a couple of 100 miles since I've been here, but it's all been within 5 square blocks. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow are all upset because Paramount studio men are around mixing us up. Yesterday, we had to practice that song out in the amphitheater. This morning at 9 o'clock, they marched us down to the parade ground and we sang that darn song over and over until 11:30 so they could record it. Well, let me stop here and explain. During the war, a number of films were made by Hollywood as part of the war effort to instill patriotism. So just by chance, while Louisa was at boot camp at Hunter College in 1944, Paramount Studios was there shooting outdoor footage for a film called
Here Come the Waves. It starred Betty Hutton.
and Bing Crosby. Betty Hutton played twin sisters who both enlisted. Anyway, I was able to track down a copy of that film, and I wanted to play the scene from that film of Louisa and her fellow waves at boot camp, marching and marching over and over again. Oh. Now, before the clip, I think we were talking about the different jobs each of you had.
Before we do, I would like to tell a story about a friend of mine who met her husband through the mail. That's how they met, by letter. I had several friends in the service. We were all stationed together in Nebraska, Dorothy and William May. Dorothy noticed that William May never got any letters from home. This was on account of how her mother wasn't a good writer and she had so many smaller children to take care of that she never got any time to write. Well, Dorothy was engaged to a man named Carl Dallenberg. So she asked Carl's brother Peter to write a letter to the poor girl who never got any letters. He wrote faithfully all through the war. They fell in love while he floated around on a boat. They tried to meet up a couple of times, but it never worked out. When he came in, she got shipped out. When she arrived, his ship went somewhere else. But that's how they met, by letter.
I got married in the service. Well, I'd known him since I was 17. Every time he was going to come home, he got transferred and we had to find a different date. When I went in the service, he got all excited because he was going to come home. And I said, hey, buddy, I wasn't going to wait forever.
But you did finally marry him.
Yeah, before the war ended, we got married and then I got pregnant, so I had to get out. After that, I joined the reserves for a year.
Well, I had a boyfriend in the Army. He was stationed in France. No, Italy. I used to send him a loaf of Italian bread with a bottle of liquor in it. I would take the dough out and I'd put the bottle in. My brother was a mailman, and he always said to me, "You know that's against the law." I said, "Oh, I like it. He likes it, so I send it." Well, one time I was almost broke and I couldn't afford a bottle. So I got a pint, a nice flat bottle. And I put it in a fruitcake. Like Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake.
William, May, and Peter finally met at Dorothy and Carl's wedding in New York City. For 4 years, they had never dated anyone. Peter took her out to dinner while they were both still in New York. That was their first date. Then he went out to Dayton in Ohio to propose. This was in 1948, I think. They only had 4 dates before they were married.
Wow, that's amazing. Talk about love at first sight. I don't know that I could have waited 4 years only communicating by letter.
Well, Harold was already in the service, and he was actually taking my sister out. And I remember writing in my diary, "He's just the kind of man I want to marry." Can't believe I wrote that. Anyway, well, we started talking, and we started a relationship. And then he was in the Air Force, and let's see, he was in the Air Force. Oh, we went to a bar mitzvah in the fall, and when he got his wings, he came back and he proposed. And then he got sent off to Europe, flying at Anzio and Monte Cassino.
Well, there was an area set aside for service people called Spanaway if you wanted to go and swim. So my friend Jessie and I, one day, we went swimming, and there were these 2 GIs diving from the board, and the shorter one stood on the shoulders of the other. And he toppled off, and he almost fell on me. But instead of that, he fell for me. It was a lengthy courtship, 3 months. We were married for 53 years.
After the war, we found a house in Pawtucket. We were married on the 4th of July. And I remember sitting on the porch for hours, just talking. And I thought to myself, this is how we're getting acquainted. This is how we're getting to know each other, to know what we're like. And I think that had to be true for an awful lot of girls. I'm just very glad that we were able to work it out.
Louisa, can I get you to read one of your letters? I know that you have something interesting to say on this subject. In fact, I noticed it was one of the few letters that you wrote to your father. Most of the letters were addressed to your mother.
My dearest Papa, I received your letter this morning, and it was so wonderful to hear from you. I've written to Mama and explained in that letter why it is impossible for me to come home to be married. The Navy just doesn't see things that way. I've prayed and prayed and prayed to ask God for everything to work out right so that everything will be happy for everyone. And I am doing my best to please you. I want you and Mama to be happy. You know that. You and I are very much in love, and we are doing our best not to let it get the best of us, as you said. We've got so now that we say goodbye at 9:30 or 10 o'clock every night, because if we stay up later, it's hard on both of us, and we don't want to do anything we'd be sorry for later. That's the reason we figured it would be best to be married soon. I know you'll understand. I can see your point, and Mama's point, and I think you can see our point too. So please, you and Mama talk over all I've written to you both, and we will wait for your answer. I love you very much. Your loving daughter, Louisa.
The Navy wouldn't give you leave to get married? Well, it sounds like things were getting a little...
Oh, yeah, yes, and yes. But the good news is that the very next day, after this letter, I was able to write home to my dearest folks to tell them that we could get leave to get married, to come home and get married. And we only had 5 days and travel time by train, so it was barely enough time, but it was enough.
Well, now that we all know a lot more about your love lives, I'd like to know more about what each of you did in the service.
Well, when I first went in, they gave me a job to go to the schools in Chattanooga, recruiting. They told me what universities to go to. I had my own staff car, which was great. But going through the mountains, there's only one way in, one way out, and no way to come back if you made an error. Well, I had this woman with me who had been in a horrible accident, stitches in her forehead and her face, but I didn't know it, at the time. And, when they first asked me if I knew how to drive, I said yes. But in reality, I had only had 3 lessons with my father before I joined. After 3 lessons, he said, "Bloody hell, you're stripping my gears." So that was that. So we're going through the mountains, and every time I made a mistake, and I made a lot of them, she turned to me and said, "When we get back, I'm telling the colonel on you. After the bad accident I was in and all you've put me through." Well, by the time we got to the other side of the mountain, I had no tires. They were gone. We were riding on rims. We had to go buy tires for the car.
From supplies, I was transferred to motor transport. I originally wanted to be a recruiter, but I had no college, so I couldn't be a recruiter. But I drove everything. Command, reconnaissance, the Jeep weapons carrier. One day, I was asked to take the truck and pick up some supplies. I had to have 3 men with me to pick the stuff up. We took the truck and loaded everything in. Everything was fine until we got to the main highway. I had to stop for traffic, and then nothing. The truck was dead. Do any of you boys in the back know anything about the truck? Nobody knew anything. So I lifted up the hood, and I'm getting all this boo-hoo-hoo. We won't be going overseas. We're here for the duration. And all this hooting and hollering about how, she thinks she's going to repair it. I said to myself, oh my God, the battery was broken. It was all bent-like. Is there any string on any of those boxes? Oh, we're going to get the truck fixed for spring? Everything is going to be just fine. I took the cord they handed me, meshed it around the battery, got back in the truck, turned the key, and it sparked! What a big hooray!
Well, I had an interview for a weather observer, but they wouldn't let me have it because they thought it'd be too much eye strain for me. So my second choice was a link trainer, teaching pilots how to fly blind using only their instruments. So they seemed to approve of me for that, so they put me in the running for it. I had to take a teaching test, and a voice test, because link trainers had to have a clear voice with no regional accents. So the girls from the South, they were absolutely out of the running, because of the accent. But competition for the job was keen. It was very, very popular with the girls.
I wonder why. Could it have been spending all that time with young, handsome male pilots?
A wave puts her country before her comfort.
Could you explain about a link trainer a little bit more?
A link trainer taught pilots how to come in when the weather closed in on them. In those days, most pilots flew by sight, so when the weather closed in, they didn't know where they were. So we taught them with the aid of a simulator called a link trainer. It was kind of like being in a plane. In fact, we had to fly in an actual plane, listen to the real signal so we would know what to do when they were in the air. Oh, and there's one in the Smithsonian, by the way.
I had the job of basic communications. At first, it was changing out the transmitters in the evening time because radio waves go farther at night.
We had a dangerous job, but I didn't think so at the time. Guarding prisoners of war, German prisoners. We had to watch them close. The Italians we trusted, they could hang around. We weren't supposed to leave our sentry boxes, but I was always nosy. When I came out of the box, these guys, these Marines would come down and say, "Look at that little girl over there." In my little GI shoes, I walk along the streets. In my little cotton hose, I give the boys a treat. My skirt is like a barracks bag, my hat is like a pot. But I'm in the army now, and this is what I got. In my raincoat extra small, I look just like a sack. But I'm in the army now, and proud that I'm a whack. The army issues clothes all right, they make you look an awful sight. Just like a mare that runs at night, I'm in the army now. I love to sing.
It was a lot of fun. Well, you know, at the time, I didn't realize it then, but I was scared, you know, I was scared. And I knew how to fight. If I was ever backed up against a wall, I would know how to fight. I used to always say, that big fat mouth of mine never knew when to shut up.
I was also in charge of the intercoms and the public address system. In fact, the public address system couldn't make its way around all the fields, so we had this sound truck that we used to drive around in, especially when we were on alert. Oh, and when the visiting dignitaries came, they had their meetings outside, and I would set up the microphones. I got to meet Jack Dempsey. Ooh. He was such a gentleman. He was with the Navy pushing war bonds, and Wallace Beery and Jackie Coogan, he was with the paratroopers.
Oh, I will never forget the takeoff of my first flight. We zoomed along the runway, and before I knew where we were, the ground was 200 feet below us. I was sitting in the back, alone, looking out the window, and I was just getting used to the idea that there was nothing between me and the earth but 500 or 600 feet of empty air when we climbed to 7,000 feet. Oh, you can't imagine the wonder of it. I mean, I had a chance to watch all of my training in actual practice. After about 3 hours, we headed back home. And the pilot turned to me and he said, "You want to fly it?" Well, it took me exactly 3 seconds to decide. I said to myself, "Louisa, you will never forgive yourself if you allow this chance to go by." So I said, "Sure." So I sat in the pilot's seat, and the pilot sat in the co-pilot seat, and he showed me what course to follow, and I flew. For 15 minutes, all the way back to base, I flew that plane alone. We were almost to Atlanta when we switched seats, and I thought the ground was going to come right up and hit us because we seemed to come down so fast, and I gasped and everybody on the plane laughed, but I flew.
So, I was in this line, requisition, and there were 2 GIs in the line. There was one in front of me, one in back. And the one in back kept saying, Sure she is. And the other one, I don't know. All you could do is ask. So finally I said, ask me what? They said, well, it's Friday, and we made a chicken soup. We're cooks. Now, this is in Manila. And they said, would you like a nice bowl of chicken soup? And I said, provided I can have the drumstick. With pleasure. So, are you Jewish? Yes, I am. I said, I didn't have any transportation. They said, don't worry, we'll take care of it. So when I was finished with my business and they were finished with theirs, they took me to where they lived. They lived in a house of officers. They did the cooking and the cleaning, you know, GI's housekeeping. It was better than being out with the planes and the shooting and all that. So all of a sudden, this fellow comes walking into the kitchen. And one of the GIs, one of the cooks, says to him, oh, we weren't expecting you. Well, now, I look at him, and he looks at me, and he says, Helen, what are you doing here? You know each other? Yes, we're cousins. All over the world. And here we are.
I would not trade 1 minute of my time in the service. I think that is the most wonderful thing, aside from my marriages. That is the next wonderful thing, being in the service.
I have to say, it was a wonderful experience for me. It gave me a sense of self-confidence that I don't think I had before.
Well, like I said before, you meet so many wonderful people in the service.
Well, I think that is a great place to end. Thank you all for sharing your wonderful stories with us.
Before we go, I'd love it if we could all sing just one more song together. It's one of my favorites. We sing it at every American Legion meeting. I'm sure everyone knows the words to God Bless America.
All right.
And if you don't, just follow me. God
Bless America.